Hello, my fellow seekers. Welcome to Into the Work, therapy for empaths, seekers, and the intuitively driven, where you have front row seats to therapy sessions and expert interviews that will help you define the important work that you're here to do. So I guess you actually have something better than front row seats. You practically have a seat on my couch. That's right, you will have unrestricted access to actual sessions with real people, exploring real life issues. You will continue to be inspired by powerful conversations with experts and healers that might just share exactly what it is that you need to hear to get unstuck. I am Michelle Pauverman. I am a recovering people pleaser and former anxiety-driven empath, turned now mostly grounded psychotherapist and intuitive coach. I have been helping people for almost 20 years manage their limiting beliefs and anxiety to finally stop the self-sabotage and step into their gifts. I created this podcast, Into the Work, to give you a place to learn more about yourself and give you actionable strategies to finally move those roadblocks holding you back so you can go for what you want. Above all else, my hope is that this podcast is a catalyst for your awakening. If you're listening, you've already taken a step towards getting off of autopilot, and our next steps together will be taken episode by episode, waking you up to the possibilities, the new ways of thinking and being, so that you can stretch into that next level of your story. The spark has already been lit, and my friend, this is a journey from spark to brilliance. So together, let's light a fire. Hey there, welcome back to the show. Today we're talking about boundaries. I'm going to start a little differently today by asking you a few questions. I want you to just go ahead and listen to my questions and just allow free thought to come to mind. Okay, so I'm going to ask a question. You're just going to allow the thoughts to come to mind quickly and freely and move on, okay? So the first thing I want to ask you is to take a look at your life. Just take a look around at your life and how is it going? Just let those thoughts come right up quickly. First thoughts, first words. How do you feel in your relationships? What are your first thoughts? How do you feel in your relationships? How are you doing at home with your family? How are you showing up? How are the demands of your life or work feeling right now? And then I want to ask you, how are you taking care of yourself? Are you following through on all the things you decided were super important for your well-being? How is that going? Health-wise, what's going on for you? Are you tired, exhausted, burnt out, dealing with health issues that are sticking around longer than you'd like? How is your anxiety? How is your mindset, your internal emotional health? What comes to mind? I wanted to share with you today something that you might not have considered as the culprit to any or all of the issues, anything you thought of that isn't quite feeling good enough. And I want to point out to you that there is one thing at the base of all of these issues, and that is your boundaries. And I'm not just talking about when it's easy to say yes or no to things. It's so much deeper and so much more complicated than that. So today, I'm going to talk to you about some deeper considerations for yourself and what boundary work could mean for you. So first off, let's just define what is a boundary, just to make sure we're on the same page. Now, if you were to look it up, you would see the most commonly used definition is that it's the lines and limits you create between yourself and other people. These limits, these lines that you create between you and other people are meant to clarify what is healthy and acceptable for you in your relationships, right? So it's about being healthy. It's about being very clear about what is acceptable to your well-being. It's not about controlling other people and, trying to play games. It's really just truly about your well-being. And while this is absolutely true, I think it's important for you to learn if you haven't already, that your boundaries are also an expression of your soul's work. And your current boundaries can say a lot about you and where you are at in this process. I know that sounds pretty lofty, but just bear with me, because your current boundaries truly are a reflection of your ability to connect with and express your authenticity. And when doing boundary work, you may likely find that this is a big word right now. Inauthenticity happens way more often than you realize. So yes, boundary work is about telling the truth, preserving your well-being, and it is about aligning with your authentic self. Okay, I want you just to think of it differently. And being an expression of your authentic self in the world. That's what boundaries are about. Being an expression of your authentic self in the world. That is true soul work. So another word I like to use when I am talking about being authentic is the word realness. Do you consider yourself to be real? Is it a value of yours to be real with people? It is of mine. Like, I definitely grew up with that value of I want to be somebody who's just real with people. And so I found it really interesting in my own path. I came across a study that proposes that realness is one of the core aspects of authenticity, okay? And can be qualified as actually a personality trait. But the propensity to act in accordance with how one feels regardless of the consequences, that is being real. So the study was in the Journal of Research and Personality. Real means behaving on the outside the way one feels on the inside, without regard for the consequences of that, right? Without worrying about externally how everybody's feeling, everybody's experiencing you, and you're really just being authentically true to yourself. So let's face it, right? You are my empathic friend. You have been probably overextending, over-explaining, maybe over-giving of yourself. There's a high likelihood, just because it happens a lot for us. And you have likely been diluting any of your attempts to set authentic boundaries. And so I just want to add this little nugget into this part of our talk here today. We tend to think, on the surface, we believe that we don't say the boundaries because we care so much about the people or the person who's on the other end of it. But it's really not quite it. It's more complicated than that. Really, it's because we are afraid of those consequences of being real, right? We are afraid of those consequences. We are really avoiding our own discomfort. We don't set boundaries not just because of the discomfort of others, but really it is in the moment, it's about our own discomfort. Nobody has shown us discomfort yet, right? We haven't set the boundary yet. We have no idea how that person's going to respond. The anxiety that you're experiencing, the fears that make us so uncomfortable, disappointing or hurting others is a big one. Being mean, being thought of as cold, being abandoned in some way, or rejected. But that's just a story. So I want to introduce to you a little nugget here of that is your story. It's not the truth, right? And the real reason you struggle with setting boundaries is that you are uncomfortable with your own fears and anxiety of what could happen, your what ifs, as they say, right? So a lot of those what ifs live in your head. And sometimes you're right. The people don't like your sudden shift in boundaries. There will definitely be people in your life who do not like the fact that you are shifting how you're showing up for them. But that's why, and this is so important, so if you are multitasking, come back to me. That is why it's so important for you to connect with the fact, and I say that with a capital F, the fact that your self-abandonment has a price. When you suppress your own emotional needs to serve the needs of others, there is a price physically, emotionally, and spiritually. For example, we know that 85% of those with autoimmune issues are women. It's crazy, right? And with further investigation, we have also learned that many of those women have underlying beliefs that their needs are not as important as the needs of others. And they have been groomed or taught to feel guilty otherwise. And so I wonder for you, right? As I wondered for myself, I wonder for you if you wholeheartedly knew that crossing your own boundaries, abandoning your own feelings, out of fear of disappointing others or whatever your reasoning, if you wholeheartedly knew that it would lead to a chronic health issue, would you still do it? What if you knew with certainty that abandoning your own emotional well-being, your own needs, so that others are not disappointed or whatever else your reasoning is, what if you were certain that it's so erosive to your mental health that it will cause you a significant decline that causes you to experience increased anxiety, self-worth issues, so much so that you decline in your spiritual connection to trust and meaning. Therefore, fulfilling your purpose here becomes difficult. Instead, you question your worth. You feel powerless and stuck because that is the result of self-abandonment. If you knew these things with certainty, if you know it now, will you still say or think or believe or act as if other people's needs are more important than yours? Will you still struggle with tolerating your discomfort and fears and just say, I'm just gonna have to be unwell. I'm just gonna have to get sick. I'm just gonna have to be unwell in my life. I need to say yes. And so, well, Michelle, when you say it like that, I know, right? So I know I'm making it sound so daunting, but it's true. If you really look at the research, read about it, learn about it. This is one way that us women in particular, particularly empathic women, are not blossoming in the world. It is just a way, it is a truth, it is part of our healing here that is crucial to your success. Okay, now that I've glazed over the important work of understanding your why. So if you can adopt some of that and you could dig deeper into that, because your why is going to be more individual to you than that general statement, but let's break down how you can start to pay attention now when it comes to what boundary work is most important for you. So I'm just going to break down 3 different types of boundaries that you're going to need to pay attention to. And as I talk about them, I just want you to consider, just let it marinate and see what feels like, well, that's me, okay? So first and foremost, we're going to identify and we're going to talk about your internal boundaries. See, most of all, what you read about when you look up boundary work is the definition I gave you earlier, and it usually has to do with your relationships to others. But I'm starting with internal boundaries here for a reason, my friend, because I think internal boundaries can be the trickiest. And when we heal our internal boundaries, it helps support us with our external boundaries. So hear me out. Your internal boundaries determine the relationship you have with yourself. For instance, do you keep commitments to yourself? When you commit to something, when you set a goal, when you decide this is what I'm doing, when we talked in the beginning about those super important, when I asked you that question about your super important things you needed to do for your well-being, and then you aren't doing them, that is an internal boundary issue. When you say I'm going to work out and you don't, it's an internal boundary issue. When you self-abandon for the sake of other people's wants and needs, again, that is an internal boundary issue as well, because you're not holding the boundary for yourself. Not just the boundary with other people, but the boundary that you have with yourself, that I'm going to slow down. As that ask is coming in from somebody else, you're going to slow down and you're going to recognize that your desire to abandon yourself and say yes is very much about making this over as quick as possible because it's uncomfortable. And this is where you set the boundary with yourself. No, I'm going to tolerate this. I'm going to breathe into it and slow down. I'm going to say things like, I need a moment. Let me think about that. I need to take a couple days before I can answer you. Great question. There is a way for us, and I think it's relieving to us healers and helpers, is that there is a way to be kind and caring and graceful and boundaried. It's not about being mean, okay? But do you minimize and dismiss your own feelings, right? And that is another way we need to look at our own boundaries. In addition to also just your negative self-talk, complaining, those are poor boundaries, right? If you're complaining all the time, if you are attaching to a lot of negative thinking, then you've lost a boundary with yourself and your thoughts, right? I love Abraham Hicks and how he breaks it down in terms of breaking down how you approach these negative thoughts and shift to what's the next highest thing I can consider instead. What is the next highest thought I can reach for when I'm having a negative spiral that brings me out and allows me to see this in a new light, another perspective. Sometimes we just have to get ourselves to neutral. And that is also boundary work with ourselves. And then that is when people are like, usually have the mind blower, like, boom, what? I did never considered that. That I let that go all day long on autopilot, and I'm just a ball in the pinball machine bouncing around all day to my thoughts. And we can actually have boundaries with our thoughts. It's mind-blowing, and it really can be life-changing to really start to step into and empowering yourself to have boundaries with how you show up for yourself, what you allow, what you're willing to, sink your teeth into for a while, or perhaps it's really, no, I don't allow that. I don't allow that. We're going to stop that right now. And really standing in your power with yourself. I think you can probably imagine how that helps you stand in your power with others, right? Sometimes the most important no that you learn to say truly is to yourself, right? I mean, our internal world is rich. And I know you understand that it's multi-layered here. It's not simple, but I really believe sometimes we have to look at what no's do I need to hear and what yeses am I not giving myself, right? It works both ways. So that's your internal boundaries, and there's so much there to unpack. And so I just want you to sort of marinate with some of those thoughts about what you want for yourself. How would you like it to be different? What kind of boundaries would you like to have with yourself? Really, what kind of relationship would you like to have with yourself? And finding some way to end every day with addressing, or begin every day addressing how you're showing up and setting your goals and intentions and what you want for yourself, focusing on the high vibrational thoughts, of course, high vibrational things you want for yourself, exciting things. We're not going to write a list of all the shitty things that we did for ourselves during the day, no. But it is a way of keeping on track of why you're doing this. I want your why. You want your why. So that's the internal boundaries. Now, the external boundaries, your external boundaries, they set the foundation for your relationships with other people. So I want you to consider that you teach other people how to treat you. I've read some fun ways of looking at this, like you hand other people an operating manual. Either way, you educate people on how they should treat you. And so without those internal boundaries, right, you're kind of going at it and you are self-sacrificing, you are overgiving, you are whatever you're doing with other people that you don't like the results on. I want you to take a consideration. I want you to consider taking responsibility, because it's way more empowering than thinking everybody out there are jerks, right? It's way more empowering to recognize, wait a minute, this is me. I've taught them all this. They're all conditioned. I've been training them for years. And so that gives you some empowering place to jump from, to say, oh, okay, I need to change my manual. I need to update everybody and let them know, that things have changed. And so, yes, your foundation for how your relationships are with other people are about your external boundaries and how you've allowed them to treat you, basically, and jumped in and said, I will, or whatever it is that you do that you don't like going on in your relationships right now. I want you to think about how they can be related to your boundaries, right? Other people, they might be very comfortable, asking you to do X, Y, and Z. And this is where it gets tricky, is that when we are overgiving, overextending, we have a little bit of a rule book inside us, right? So these are rules because they're based on beliefs as in terms of how you get love, that you won't be rejected, that you bring value. And so you do those overgiving thing. And there are other examples too. I'm just kind of going with the overgiving. But if you can imagine that it gets a little tricky because people who don't have very good boundaries with other people, right, they tend to get mad, hurt, insulted when people ask them for something that you would never ask, or put something out there that breaks one of your rules, or don't overgive back, or don't self-sacrifice back. It feels like, oh, you just had me do all that for you, and now you're not going to do the same for me. You're going to set boundaries with me? That's so mean. And so we can really get kind of attached to the idea that this is the other person's problem, that they are selfish, and not get into the fact that, well, okay, we are training them how we want to be treated. Remember, they are simply asking for what they need or want, or they're putting it out there, and they have different boundaries than what they're asking, right? So they're willing to ask for something, even though they aren't willing to give it. And while that seems like mind-blowing crazy to the empath, I think for some of us, we really do need to take a look at, okay, wait a minute. If I had really good boundaries, I'd just be like, oh no, I can't do that. But hey, good for you for asking, right? We might encourage them like, oh my God, that was badass that you asked that because I see you trying to get your needs met, even though you're running on empty and you yourself can't give. So good job, but no, I can't, I'm sorry, I can't do that for you. But can you see how that exchange would be so different? How you would receive that would be so different if you yourself had good boundaries. And so we tend just look at when you're resentful of other people not behaving the same way as you in the overgiving and blah, blah, blah. It's not that I'm saying our relationships shouldn't be balanced. They should, and you choose wisely, right? And a lot of us do tend to choose other people. Well, I guess we could go either way. We choose other people that are like us. We can feel attracted to that, but a lot of times we choose other people who are not like us and who are very boundaried and who ask a lot of us because we feel the most challenged by them to be loved. So we tend to feel motivated to prove ourselves to receive that love and that value. So I don't want to go on too much of a tangent here, but I do think it was important to mention that piece on it. And so I want you just to notice when you say yes to things in a moment, but later feel resentful. That is so important for when you're looking at what bothers me, where do my external boundaries need to change? Does attempting to speak up or voice your boundary create anxiety for you? So like when you're in the moment of being given a scenario, I want you just to notice your discomfort rising. I want you to notice how you feel in your body, which I realize requires you to be present for it. And typically when we don't have good boundaries and something comes at us that's going to poke at that, we tend to kind of go into fight or flight, or we kind of go into our own little trauma responses in a way, like we feel very vulnerable. And so we want to get over it quickly. And we just want to be like, yes, 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 or whatever it is that needs to be taken care of. I want you to notice how you feel during. I want you to try to slow yourself down. Take a deep breath and actually slow your heart rate down, slow your body, all your sensational stuff down, and just say, hold, right? create some space for yourself. That's the challenge. Create some space by saying, let me get back to you. It's great that you asked, or I'm so honored that you asked, or any way that you want to be kind. And I can't answer that right now. Let me get back to you. It's just a nice way to gather yourself before saying no to something that you know you really need to say no to. Now, I'm just wondering also if you feel like people just don't hear you when you set a boundary. Some of you might feel this way, like I speak, but nobody's hearing me, right? So if you feel like people aren't hearing you, I'm setting the boundary, I want you to consider a couple of things. One, you are disappearing a bit when you're setting the boundary. You're not actually standing in your power. You're sort of maybe getting a little quieter, and it's possible your voice is getting quieter. It's also possible that you, and very likely, and I mentioned this earlier, is that you are diluting the words that you're using. Instead of speaking very directly, you're sort of diluting it with storytelling. Or, oh, I have to do this, and I have to do this, and I have to do this. I'm so sorry, I have to do this. And then the person's like, where's my loophole in, right? Okay, I'm not really sure what this means. So can you do it? And you're like, I guess I have to now that you keep asking, right? So I want you just to think about how that is showing up for you, how you might be being too passive in the way that you're being approached to set a boundary, okay? And sometimes, another little thing I want to mention in the external boundary stuff is sometimes we tend to decline help to maintain control. So sometimes we feel like resentful. You know, you've got that person that asks of you and you say yes, but doesn't give back, or tries to give back in such a way, right? Maybe they try to give back, but you say no. It's another way with external boundaries that you can kind of really self-abandon yourself because you might really need the help, but you say no because in your storytelling, it's going to be too difficult. It's going to be an inconvenience. They're going to be frustrated. They don't really want to do it. They don't mean it. And so you cancel out that question and say, no, it's okay. I want you to consider that as well, okay? And so these are just different little things to think about when it comes to your external boundaries. Now, the last thing I want to talk to you about is just your energetic boundaries, because this is a little different. So, you know, this is very specific to you as a sensitive soul here. And if you have not already, I just want to put a plug in for episode 9. If you have not already listened to this, I highly, highly recommend you listen to the Empath Stop Feeling Drained 5 Steps to Feeling Magical Again. It's a mouthful, I realize. But episode 9 is really good on energy management and things you can do to heal yourself from the energetic boundary standpoint, okay? So don't miss that. So I want you to think about, if you notice you might feel really spongy, absorbing other people's moods and emotions, and I just want you to pay attention to if you feel that way often, if you feel that way all the time, if you feel that way under certain circumstances that trigger you. So I want you just to pay attention to what your literal energy field feels like. If you feel like you are absorbing a lot of other people's moods and you walk in places and leave places and you don't feel great, I want you to consider that your boundaries are down. I want you to think of it that way. If you go out to lunch with a friend and you guys have been friends forever, but you just keep noticing every time you hang out, you're just like bummed, right? Like they complain a lot. Maybe their vibe is lower, and you're realizing over time that every time you hang out, you're feeling really crappy after. And I want you to consider your boundaries in that. And then you might also have to consider that, you know, you have to make choices in your life. And not that we should be abandoning our friends during difficult times, not what I'm saying. But if you recognize that there is a distancing happening and that it feels almost like it's out of your control because it doesn't feel good anymore, I just want to encourage you to recognize that you might be shifting your vibration upward, and you're doing the work and you're doing things to feel better, and you're really recognizing, maybe it's family, right? You're recognizing that you are feeling really crappy when you're with this person. And so I want you to acknowledge that, one, there's a boundary issue, right? You can set boundaries with yourself. You can set boundaries with your energy field, which is I talk a lot about in that episode 9. And then you can also take a look at is, what are the boundaries I need to have in this relationship in order to move forward? Because I feel sick because I'm having a hard time holding my boundaries up and not absorbing some of this. It just is too low for me. And so it's an important conversation to have. Hey, I really am trying to really raise my vibration and feel healthier. My physical body, it's part of my healing of my physical body. It's part of my healing of my emotional self. And hey, can we, I would love it if we could get together and really spend time talking about some of the really good stuff that's happening. I feel like we don't really talk about that anymore. And I want to know what's going on with you that's really good. And I just think we're going to feel a lot better when we leave. And let's do this as an exercise. Let's just do this out of curiosity and see how we feel. And see if you can get them on board. If you can't, and they feel off-put by this, if they feel people who really need to be in their wounds, it can be really difficult. It can feel vulnerable. There can really be an addiction there to stay in the wound. And so it can feel like you might be judging them, and they feel defensive, or they can't let go of the victimhood that they're in. And that's just not where they're at. And they need to play that out perhaps. And that's not yours to fix. So you might need to change your boundaries. So another part of energetic boundaries that is not talked about a lot, and I think it's actually really important because I have seen it a lot. So do you tend to use your over-vigilant senses, okay? Your spidey senses? Do you tend to scan people until you know them better than they know themselves, right? Are you constantly reading everybody? Are you trying to play psychic, behind the scenes and trying to understand and think about or really sense other people, what's going on in their lives? Do you tend to be scanning people and really trying to be in their business? Because guess what? I think you know what I'm going to say. It isn't any of your business. It isn't any of our business to know all the things that are going on. I shouldn't know somebody better than they know themselves if I just met them, right? Maybe my husband, right? Maybe my good friends. But scanning people and playing that role really does get you into their energy field too. It's really important that you pay attention to your boundaries, that you're not seeping into other people's energy all the time. That's actually not helpful for you. It is much better for you to stop enmeshing with other people. Start holding up boundaries around other people. You don't need to know what's going on with other people. That's their business. And it will increase more health and well-being for you. We don't need to be enmeshed in everybody else's stuff. And it's great to feel like, yeah, I have that ability. I can pick up on other people's stuff. I can know things, but it isn't necessarily any of your business. And so we need certain boundaries in place for ourselves if you tend to stray that way. And the other thing I'm going to mention too is just I want you to pay attention to, are you having a lot of lethargy? And do you feel like you just don't have the energy to live up to your goals? And and of course you're going to go to a doctor and make sure you're doing okay. But I just want to say sometimes that can be an energy management thing. It's certainly one of mine. And do you feel easily overstimulated or drained by others, which is kind of an obvious one. But is it something that kind of eventually, potentially, when I say this, does it resonate? That leads for you to feel more and more lethargic in your life? That you've been drained? And that others are draining you? Just consider that might be poor energy management on your part. It empowers you to take control of it, to get better, to do something about it versus feel stuck and unwell, right? So that is the 3 different types of boundaries within you that I want you to just look at. Where are you falling short? What are your needs? Where is it that you need to heal and get stronger? If you really want to make a change, it also is important that you look at the beliefs, because the beliefs you have deep down inside, the parts of yourself that maybe you don't really want to pay attention to or haven't paid a lot of attention to, they are the root of your boundary issues, right? They are the deep underbelly of the boundary issues that got you exactly where you are right now. And perhaps you've healed some of them, some of the most common, right? I feel not good enough. I'm not worthy. Some of the real big, most common ones, but then you can actually get creative and actually learn much more specifically what kind of beliefs you have about yourself that get in the way of the boundaries. Sometimes they're really wrapped up in memories that you've stored, beliefs you have, parts of you that you've labeled as yucky that you don't like. So since you're spending all this time hiding this part of you, you're not really getting out there into the world and doing what you want or holding the boundaries that you would like to have. And so a powerful approach to healing some of these beliefs, getting in the way of your success, is shadow work, which has been around for ages and still offering a profound approach to healing. If you missed it, just to refer you over to episode 1, Shadow Work, Unmask the Parts of You That Keep You From Believing in Your Self-Worth. That episode is a great way to start opening up your mind to the possibility of your own shadow work that needs to be done. So thank you so much for listening in today. I hope this was helpful, and I hope that it gets you kind of moving the juices and you're able to maybe look at little spots of change where you can start as soon as tomorrow. All right, be well, my friends. Thank you for listening to Into the Work Therapy for Empaths and Seekers. Don't forget to grab your free gift, your Shadow Work Transformation Bundle at michellepoverman.com. I've included everything you need to get started to break through the patterns of self-sabotage and finally start to heal the parts of yourself that are getting in the way of truly reaching your potential. From a powerful meditation designed to help you meet and embrace your shadow self, to the guide that's full of curated prompts and important questions to support you on this journey. This really can be the work for you to unmask the root cause of all the issues you've been experiencing, honestly, and start to feel free to believe in yourself and go for what you want. The link for this free bundle is in the show notes. And if you like this episode, I would be so grateful if you could take a moment and rate, click and follow, and leave a review. Of course, you can always follow me on socials at Michelle Poverman. And keep in mind, as you embark on your journey from spark to brilliance, remember, the universe is always conspiring in favor of your awakening. Everything that's happening is in support of you lighting your own fire within. So until we meet again, may your path be well lit and your heart be guided. Shine bright, seekers. Until next time.